Hi, I'm Reverend Patricia Adams Farmer, and the title of my sermon today is Here Comes the Sun. This spring, as COVID-19 ravaged New York City, with patients dying at an alarming rate and healthcare workers stressed to the breaking point, Lenox Hill Hospital in New York tried something different. They employed the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun, as part of their therapy. They played the song through the public address system every time a coronavirus patient was discharged or recovered enough to be removed from the ventilator. Pulmonologist Stephen Feinsilver, who was treating coronavirus patients at the time, said, "Everyone in the hospital is under tremendous pressure, especially for those I see on the front lines of critical care. It's like a war zone out there. The work is relentless. To hear this song on a loudspeaker is brilliant. It's just what people need. It's a reminder that patients are in fact recovering. You feel good for a moment." Well, feeling good even for a moment is crucial in tough times. Writer Sari Harar, in a well-researched article on this particular hospital, reports that the emotional lift provided by that Beatles song should not be underestimated. One nurse at the hospital explained that the song played some 20 times in a single day, and each repetition made her feel better. "It was an overwhelming sense of wow," she said. "We're making a difference." I got very teary-eyed. It's in these here come the sun moments that we really understand that joy is important, whether it's through a pandemic, a personal tragedy, a long illness. Joy is important. As psychologist Maria Soroy says, clearly the kind of happiness that matters in tough times has nothing to do with birthday hats or smiley faces. This isn't delusional Hollywood glee and delight. The happiness that helps in great difficulty is realistic. It recognizes fears and anxieties. It looks for meaning. It nourishes and sustains us. In the Bible, we see that very kind of happiness and joy in the praise psalms, which were written during hard times, right alongside the psalms of anguish. The psalms remind us that anxiety and fear and grief are not the only appropriate emotions during hard times. Joy is important too. Our psalm for today, Psalm 65, is filled with joy, as in verse 8, "You make the gateways of the morning and the evening shout for joy." Or verse 13, "The meadows clothe themselves with flocks, the valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy." The Bible is filled with what Eleanor Porter calls the rejoicing texts. Remember her famous children's book, Pollyanna? Well, Pollyanna gets a bad rap these days, as optimistic people are often ridiculed as being Pollyanna-ish. But if you reread the book as an adult, like I did, you'll discover it is truly full of wisdom that we adults sometimes need to hear. In one scene of the story, Pollyanna is talking to an unhappy minister friend about her late father, who was also a minister. And she tells her friend he wouldn't have remained a minister if it, quote, "wasn't for the rejoicing texts." "The what?" the minister responded. "Well," she said with a laugh, "that's what Father used to call them. Of course, the Bible didn't name them that, but it's all those that begin with 'Be glad in the Lord,' or 'Rejoice greatly,' or 'Shout for joy,' and all that, such a lot of them. Once when Father felt especially bad, he counted them. There were 800 of them." 800, her friend said. Pollyanna nodded and said, "Yes, 800 that told you to rejoice and to be glad. That's why Father named them the rejoicing texts. He said he felt better right away. That first day he thought to count them. He said if God took the trouble to tell us 800 times to be glad and rejoice, he must want us to do it. Some. Pollyanna's father had it right. We may not always rejoice, but we are called to the joyful path, especially during hard times. Well, how can we do this when all seems bleak? It's important to remember that in the wake of a life-shattering crisis or a global disaster, something good, surprisingly, usually happens. 2 months after the World Trade Center terrorist attacks in 2001, a University of Pennsylvania survey took over 4,000 Americans their survey, and they found out of these 4,000 that they felt more gratitude, more hope, more kindness, more love than they did before 9/11. They were not pretending that the horrors of 9/11 didn't happen. On the contrary, it was in response to the horror. A study by psychology professor Barbara Fredrickson found that students actually acknowledged the great despair, the anger, and the fear they felt after 9/11. But some also were buoyed by what Fredrickson calls the, quote, ordinary magic. Ordinary magic. I love that term. The ordinary magic of fleeting positive emotions, such as those moments of ordinary magic that were sparked in the hospital, patients and staff upon hearing the song, Here Comes the Sun. Like a candle in a dark room, in dark times, light, any flicker of ordinary light, burns much brighter and is noticed and cherished and even feels magical. Savoring these flickers of light, these good emotions set in relief against a dark backdrop, can help us develop emotional resilience so that we know we can get through whatever life throws at us. The Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl famously said, "Everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Frankl calls this tragic optimism. The American Psychological Association calls it post-traumatic growth. Christians call it grace, and it's available to all of us. So we know that joy is possible, that God calls us to joy, as we see in our text for today. But how do we do it? Just from a practical standpoint, how can we harness this emotional resilience in the face of an illness or a crisis or a pandemic? Well, Laurie Santos teaches a class at Yale called Psychology and the Good Life, which has become a worldwide sensation. Nearly 1 million people of all ages signed up for the free online version in the first 3 months of this year. 3 strategies from a course are worth noting. The first strategy is to connect. Connect. Human connection is the classic recipe for happiness. Dr. Robert Waldinger, director of the 83-year-old Harvard Study of Adult Development, which, by the way, is the longest-running study of its kind in the country, he says that the clearest message we get from our study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. He says that a sense of joy seems to reach into our cells, reducing corrosive forces like inflammation and stress that are so harmful to our bodies. And we all know that one of the best ways to connect, besides developing quality relationships, is through helping others, friends or strangers. This need to connect and to help others are both good reasons to join a church, and why during a pandemic it's so important to stay connected through Zoom and other social platforms. Simply inviting a lonely friend to join in can bring others into this vital connection, which is the #1 antidote to unhappiness. But the second strategy is simply to move and breathe. To move and breathe. Physical activity can boost your happiness by reducing stress and releasing the feel-good brain chemicals. And moving and deep breathing both bring more oxygen to your brain, stimulating your vagus nerve, which calms the anxious mind. Whether you practice yoga or take a walk, you will be building up your capacity for joy. And now the third strategy is to take a moment to savor the things that you love. To savor the things you love. Savoring the moment means practicing gratitude and simply being aware of the morning's birdsong and the joy of our pets and music, especially music. Few people know how Here Comes the Sun came about. Well, the song was composed when all seemed to be going wrong with the Beatles. It seems that George Harrison just could not face another stress-filled business meeting with bandmates and accountants. So he played hooky and went to the house of his friend Eric Clapton. And there he came up with the melody while walking around in the garden. Now, at the recording time, John Lennon was recovering from a car crash, so he never contributed to the song. The day of the song's mixing was the last time the four Beatles were ever together in a recording studio. From such tension was born one of the happiest songs ever written. Oh, this week, I was startled by the sound of birdsong when I went outside to empty the trash. It was a tune I've never heard before, and it was magical. I have no idea what kind of bird it was. I would love to know, but it was magical. And light from such ordinary things burns brightest in the darkness. And we are each empowered by the Spirit to discover happiness in surprising places and unexpected times. We simply need to connect, to move and breathe, and to savor the graceful and grace-filled moments of life. May we each find the sun shining a little more brightly this week as we meditate on the rejoicing text, not only in the Bible, but in our hearts. For God has written joy in our hearts. We are, in a sense, hardwired for joy. We have only to reach for it. Amen.